December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor woke peacefully beneath the golden Hawaiian sky, unaware that 183 Japanese aircraft were already descending through the clouds. Below decks, men played cards, laughed over breakfast, and wrote letters home, living the last ordinary Sunday morning any of them would ever know. They had families waiting, futures planned, and years of life ahead of them, none of which would survive the next 90 minutes. At 7:02 a.m., radar operators Lockhart and Elliott picked up the largest return signal either had ever seen, a massive formation closing fast from the north. They did exactly what they were trained to do. They reported it. The duty officer assumed it was friendly B-17 arriving from the mainland and hung up. The warning was received and waved away. 320 miles to the north, Commander Fuchida's formation was already crossing the final stretch of ocean. Japan's Kido Butai had crossed 3,400 miles of ocean in total radio silence. 6 carriers, 350 aircraft, and the element of complete surprise still intact. At 6 a.m., the first wave launched into the gray Pacific dawn. 183 aircraft turning south with Pearl Harbor sleeping 90 minutes away. At 7:49 a.m., Fuchida looked down and saw Pearl Harbor exactly as planned. Perfect, undefended, and completely unaware. He radioed 3 words: Tora, Tora, Tora. The formation split into waves, torpedo bombers for the battleships, dive bombers for the airfields. A choreography of destruction descending on an unsuspecting fleet. At 7:53 a.m., the first torpedo struck USS Oklahoma, and the peaceful Sunday morning silence of Pearl Harbor was shattered, never to return. In the first seconds, almost no one understood what was happening, until they saw the red circle of the rising sun painted on the wings above them. Some men ran for cover, but many ran straight to their guns, choosing to fight back in those first chaotic seconds with nothing but fury and training. USS Oklahoma took 9 torpedoes in 12 minutes and capsized, rolling onto her side with 429 men still trapped alive in the flooding compartments below. In the dark, flooded compartments, trapped men knocked on the hull with wrenches and pipes, a steady rhythm, hoping someone on the outside could hear them. At 8:06 a.m., a single armor-piercing bomb penetrated USS Arizona's forward deck and detonated over 1 million pounds of ammunition in a single instant. The explosion obliterated Arizona's entire forward section in one instant, killing 1,177 men in a single moment, the deadliest single event in U.S. Navy history. USS Arizona burned for 2 days, and of her crew of 1,512 men, nearly 1,200 never came home, most of them still entombed inside her hull today. Men swam through burning oil to reach the rescue boats. Some made it to safety, and some did not, the harbor itself burning around them. In under 2 hours, 8 American battleships had been sunk or damaged, the entire Pacific battle fleet crippled, and the flags somehow still flying above them. At Wheeler Field, 140 American planes sat parked wingtip to wingtip, and a single strafing pass destroyed more than half of them before anyone could reach a cockpit. At Hickam Field, men grabbed rifles and pistols and fired at aircraft doing 300 miles per hour, knowing it was nearly futile and not caring. USS Nevada was the only battleship to get underway during the attack, and Japan immediately targeted her, knowing a sunken hole in the channel would trap the fleet. Her captain deliberately beached Nevada at Hospital Point to keep the channel open. The ship settled onto the bottom, still flying her colors, still firing. USS Monaghan ran down a Japanese midget submarine inside the burning harbor and depth-charged it into the floor. One small, fierce victory amid the destruction. When the second wave of 167 aircraft arrived at 8:54 a.m., the American guns had found their range, and Japanese planes began falling from the sky. A handful of American pilots managed to get airborne during the attack, climbing into skies filled with hundreds of enemy aircraft, and some of them came back. Against hundreds of Japanese aircraft, a small number of American pilots fought back in the skies above Pearl Harbor, outnumbered on every side and refusing to stop. Kazuo Sakamaki washed ashore that morning and became the first Japanese prisoner of war taken by the United States, the very first of what would become millions. At 9:45 a.m., the last Japanese plane turned north and disappeared, leaving behind 18 ships sunk or damaged, 188 aircraft destroyed, and 2,403 Americans dead. Before the last Japanese plane had even disappeared, the rescue was already underway. Sailors launching boats into burning oil to reach the men still alive in the water. Rescue crews worked around the clock on Oklahoma's capsized hull, cutting through steel guided by the sound of men tapping from the dark compartments inside. 32 men were pulled alive from inside Oklahoma's hull, the last survivor rescued more than 25 hours after the attack had ended. Pearl Harbor Naval Hospital had capacity for a few hundred patients and received nearly 1,000 wounded in the first 2 hours of the morning. The surgeons of Pearl Harbor operated for 36 consecutive hours, and nurses who had never treated a combat wound were performing battlefield triage before noon. Blood donation lines formed within hours of the attack's end, civilians arriving at hospitals without being asked because it was the only way they knew to help. That night, fear settled over Oahu like a second attack. Rumors of invasion, nervous guns firing at shadows, and USS Arizona still burning in the dark harbor. Admiral Nagumo ordered no third strike, leaving Pearl Harbor's fuel farms, repair docks, and submarine base untouched, and the sleeping giant wounded but not destroyed. Yamamoto had studied at Harvard and knew America intimately, and he had warned Japan's leaders that the attack had awakened a sleeping giant filled with a terrible resolve. Across America, families gathered around their radios as the bulletins kept coming, each one worse than the last, each one changing the country a little more. In the days that followed, War Department telegrams arrived at homes in every state, and 2,403 gold stars appeared in American windows, one family at a time. On December 8th, President Roosevelt stood before a joint session of Congress, carrying one page of notes and 7 minutes that would change the course of history. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The chamber erupted, and within the hour, Congress had voted overwhelmingly for war. Across the country, people pulled their cars over to listen, and the boys who had been boys that morning were quietly making decisions they would not take back. Recruiting offices opened to lines that had formed before dawn. Young men lying about their ages to enlist. An entire generation answering with a single word: yes. 16 million Americans would serve before the war was over. Every single one of them passing through a gate, looking back once, and walking on. American factories converted to war production almost overnight. Automobile plants became tank factories, and the United States began outproducing every other nation on Earth. 6 of the 8 sunken battleships were raised, repaired, and sent back to fight. Pearl Harbor's repair crews returning the fleet to sea, one ship at a time. The soldiers who signed up in the days after Pearl Harbor shipped out to islands, deserts, and oceans that most of them had never heard of before December 7th. The Pacific War would last 3 years and 8 months, fought across the largest ocean on Earth, on hundreds of islands most Americans couldn't have named before Pearl Harbor. 6 months after Pearl Harbor, at Midway, the 4 Japanese carriers that launched the attack were sunk in a single day of combat. August 15, 1945, Japan surrendered. The war that began at Pearl Harbor ended on the deck of USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, 4 years and 2 atomic bombs later. 16 million Americans had served in uniform, and 405,000 had died. The ones who came home carried both the victory and the weight of that number with them. The USS Arizona Memorial stands above the exact spot where she sank. And every day since 1941, oil still rises from her hull to the surface. Pearl Harbor survivors came to touch these names for decades, standing at this wall year after year, until none of them were left to come. Every year, fewer survivors return. The youngest now in their late 90s, each ceremony bringing them one closer to the last. Every December 7th, the flag is lowered, reeds placed on the water, and taps played across the harbor. Unbroken every year since 1942. From the air, Pearl Harbor looks exactly as it did on December 7th, 1941. Green mountains, blue water, quiet harbor, history held in silence. The harbor is still at night, and the oil still rises from Arizona in the darkness, one slow drop at a time, as it always has. 2,403 Americans, sons, husbands, brothers, fathers, who did not choose the morning that came for them and faced it anyway.